Stacks on her mind, grinding all day, hustle refined, chattering ceiling, G steers and untamed. Wealth is a title, wealth is a game. Power in heels or sneakers on deck. Respect comes easy when you earn that check. From boardroom to businesses, she's got finesse. This woman right here, built for success. She's a bad bitch, and she signs checks. Built her own throne, what you expect? Dreaming real big, no limit, no stress. She's a bad bitch, and she signs checks. Oh, money moves, yeah, she runs the show. Hired in Queens, now let 'em know.
Really special guest today that's going to be helping me talk about losing wealth, because that's the reason I chose Annie Lennox. And there's a really awesome backstory to Here Comes the Rain Again that I wanted to share with the Confidant community folks, because, you know, I always want to keep you in the loop. When Annie Lennox wrote this song, her and her former partner from the Eurythmics, she was actually staying at a hotel in New York, the Mayflower. How many of you know the Mayflower Hotel in New York? And it just happened to be a rainy day. And she said that the rain against the hotel window just reminded her of melancholy and really spiraling in and out of depression, which I thought was fascinating, right? Because talking about losing wealth may make you feel, how many of you can relate, losing wealth and spiraling in and out of depression? Because truly, we're in some very challenging times where, unfortunately, you know, there's so many different ways to lose wealth. It could be your health, it could be divorce, it could be, you know, damage to your property, a critical illness. There's so many, unfortunately, there's so many ways to lose wealth. And so one of the reasons I have the financial celebrity, Kelley Keehn, welcome Kelley, joining us today. Now, Kelley Keehn is the founder of Money Wise Workplaces. And as I said, she's a financial celebrity extraordinaire. I just wanted to talk to her about how we can minimize the dangers of losing wealth. What's your strategy, Confidant community, to make sure you don't make emotional decisions when you fear loss? Because if you're someone who's spending a lot of time right now thinking about wealth and maybe seeing your money go up and down in the markets and feeling the pain of that, Kelley Keehn, again, our financial celebrity extraordinaire, is joining me today for this lively discussion around losing wealth. So welcome to the live, Kelley. I saw you jamming back there.
Little bit. It's only 3:00 in Alberta right now, so I'm kind of keeping it a little chill still. But
yeah, it was all elegant. The elegant jam there. I saw you. I see you, Kelley. That was awesome. Welcome. I mean, I think you have some really fascinating material that I can't wait to delve into around losing wealth. And it is such a, you know, I think especially in the market that we're in right now, where, you know, one of the ways people are losing wealth is through losing their job. So there's so much going on and there's so much anxiety and spiraling into depression happening around wealth. So I just can't wait to talk to you more. But first, before I do that, what made you even interested in this subject? What made you decide that this is something you wanted to look more deeply in?
Well, a couple of reasons. I mean, I'm certainly a student of the positive psychology movement, so I never like talking about the downside. However, we need to. You know, it's even like simple lessons like my mom teaching me when I was growing up, make sure you pay your credit card in full. Right. She didn't talk about the other side of what happens if you don't. So I think it's really important, you know, Jackie, when we're talking about finance, number one, that you understand both sides. Number two, that you realize that wealth, like health, is fluid, right? You can be healthy today and you're not tomorrow.
I don't think we spend a lot of time talking about that, right? And it's so true.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And then third, just realizing if you are in a phase where you're challenged financially, you're not alone. So I think those three things have really fueled definitely my research and my writing and my media appearances and my speaking engagements the last 20 years since I've been out of the financial industry. Right. But they were all, you know, the genesis of it came from my time in the financial industry. And I spent 12 years, over 12 years in the industry. And, I was quite young, and it was fascinating to see someone who looked like they were poor, worth 50, 100, 150 million dollars, or someone who looked very wealthy that in fact were several $1 million in the hole. So that really led me to be like, okay, I'm leaving the industry. I'm doing research and writing on this. And that's been my journey the last couple of decades. Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. And, as you say that, I'm fascinated with these backstories of these people who are either doing really, really well or appearing to do well, which are completely different things, aren't they? So I'd love it if you would share, some stories about people who lost wealth and, what lessons can the confidant community learn from their mistakes?
Oh, I could literally write a book about people that lost wealth. I mean, one that really jumped out to me when I was researching my first book, The Prosperity Factor for Women, I did a deep dive into lottery winners and just found all of that so fascinating, because one thing I'll ask audiences is, how many here play the lottery, or how many at least dream about winning the lottery? And then I ask, would you feel different as a person if you won the lottery? Most people say, no, I would still feel the same. Would your money situation change? Would you be happier? Kind of mixed responses, which I suspect you think your life would be better and you would be happier, or you wouldn't spend that money, right? I suspect. But then when I ask them, if you had 50 million or 100 million and lost it all, would you feel different about yourself? Would you feel shame and embarrassment?
Oh, yeah.
Everyone's hands go up.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, we're not so clear on if money will make us happier or if we'll be a different person, but we're super clear that if we have the money and we lose it, we're going to feel awful. So one woman in particular, a lot of stories stood out to me, but one woman in particular, her name was Sharon, and the headline read, Hamilton woman fritters away $10 million. And I thought, wow, how do you fritter away? Now, this is 20 years ago when I'm doing this research. How do you fritter away $10 million? And, they interviewed Sharon, and she was in her home, sheets on the covering the windows because she didn't have money for curtains.
I don't blame her.
Yeah. Like no, this was after she had lost all the money.
Oh, I see.
She's got 5 kids. She can't pay her rent. She's taking the bus to get to work. And you're thinking, how did you part with $10 million? And she told the reporter, well, I bought this person a house and this family member a car and things like that. And we code money very differently when it's found money, when it's RSP money versus employer money versus tax refund money.
Right. And,
but what was the most fascinating to me was, when he asked, how do you feel now that you've lost all this money? And she just said, I was raised poor. I was always poor. I know how to be poor. And I thought, isn't that the essence of everyone that loses their money that doesn't bounce back right away, right? Like, if I have a health issue or I put some weight on, I have a core belief, and it's very strong, that I am a healthy person. Now, I'm not saying that things don't happen to me by all means, or that they could, regardless of my good behavior, but I just bounce back really easily because that is within my core. What I have had to fight, because I was raised by a single mom, struggling with finances, is we were poor. So how do you change that narrative? Because, also studying very wealthy people, if they do lose their money, they come back really quickly. I'm a wealthy person. This was just a bad business decision. This was just a turn of events. This was a recession. It's fine. Right. And they don't, their core doesn't change. It's when we aren't who we want to, like the quote is, you don't get what you want, you get who you are. And Sharon was poor. Sharon didn't earn that money incrementally. So she went back to the baseline that was comfortable for her. So that's important.
It's so fascinating you say that, Kelley. I did a live. So for those of you watching who didn't see this, I highly recommend you check it out. I did a live on the I'm calling it the financial upper limit theory. And it's what you're talking about. It's basically what's your mindset around money, and how that upper limit theory is about, what level of happiness are you giving yourself? Are you allowing yourself with money?
Brilliant.
So it's truly that mindset of, I'm only allowed to be this happy. So if I'm used to being hand to mouth, that's as happy as I'm going to make myself with money, whether I have $1 million or a dollar. And so what you're talking about with these millionaires really alludes to that, which is just so fascinating. It's just like we have this internal thermometer that if we don't know how to turn it up higher, we end up just going back to reset to that same one. So thank you for sharing that. Now, what are some factors you think that, we talked a little bit about the upper limit theory. We talked about like that mindset. Are there some other factors that might contribute to how a person would end up losing wealth?
Certainly taking risks that they're not aware of. I mean, again, it does really come back to the core of who you are. I think I worried too, Jackie, talking to my younger nephews, mostly nephews, nieces.
Really?
Too.
Yeah.
But the younger generation, like just thinking that wealth creation is so simple, like looking at Instagram, looking at all of this, it's very difficult for them to understand, what a self-made multimillionaire actually went through and goes through. And I also remember interviewing with billionaire Michael Lee Chin. I had the opportunity to interview with him several times. And he said, this is how wealth goes, or this is how a business goes. You think you put in like this much effort, you're going to get this much reward, this much effort, this much reward. And you're going to have like this clear, just like the stock market, you think it should just go up like that. But he said, this is how it goes. Nothing. 10 years go by. People are like, man, you should get out of it. You should nothing. And then like 18 years. Hey, are you still on that? You're not doing it. And then all of a sudden, boom, hockey stick. And that's what happens. And because, if you haven't been in the industry, if you haven't talked to millionaires and billionaires, if you haven't seen the work ethic of, like it doesn't happen by accident. It's same again with your health, right? Like there's no substitute to going to the gym. Sure, you can have surgeries and things of that sort, but also studies have proven that those people don't change because inside they didn't do the work. They got the surgery. So even if you got that pot of money, that's where you're going to lose it. So, it's taking undue risk because you don't understand that is not how you accumulate wealth, or just not appreciating it, being uncomfortable. So getting rid of it, right? Like people overspending, maybe when they got an inheritance, like, they're not doing it consciously, but they're just pushing it away from them because they don't deserve it. Like there's just so much that goes into it. And then very lastly, those pots of money, there's been a lot of research on that as well. Like, for example, I just did a video for Money Wise Workplaces on the gambler. And it was this legend of the guy in the greenhouse coat, and he's with his wife, and they spent every single cent, lost it all on a weekend in Vegas. And, they're in bed, and he pulls out a $5 bill from his house coat, and he's like, oh, he sneaks down to the casino for one more bet, right? So he puts it on.
You're gonna win it all back.
Yeah. So like he puts it on the, black or red table. I think that's roulette. Doubles it. Within about an hour, he's up at $5 million. He has one more bet. He puts it all down. He loses everything. He slumps back to his room. He crawls into bed, and his wife says, how much did you lose? And he goes, just $5. Because it wasn't his money. It was the house's money. Like,
oh my gosh.
This is the thing. We have this weird way of coding money that we think isn't ours. If it's in your hands, if it's a pot, regardless of what it is, RSP, your employer, yours, it's all your money. But that definitely, if someone doesn't have that mindset solid, if it's an inheritance or or a bonus from work, we can just try to get rid of that because we're uncomfortable with it.
Wow. I can't remember where I heard this saying many, many years ago. And it always comes back to me, which is if you don't respect money, it won't respect you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whoa. Wow. Okay.
100%.
Speaking of this gambler the guy with the $5 who thought, let me take one more bet. How does emotions factor into all of this. So, I see it with clients in the markets when they're losing money on paper in the markets, and it can have a real psychological impact for them to make potentially irrational decisions in that scenario. So what strategies do you recommend in terms of helping people to make more rational decisions, whether it's the gambler or it's the person who, is seeing the media say, the market's down and you're losing money, and they're making these gut decisions rather than mind decisions? What are some strategies you recommend?
Yeah, I think the industry as a whole, if it's people like you, Jackie, that are financial planners that are sitting down with their clients, if it's the behavioral economics folks, if it's, the government committees trying to create more financial wellness and resilience, or if it's someone like me that's just kind of like, hey, let's pay attention to our money, emotions drive everything. Now, sometimes we want our subconscious to drive things. If I am driving and the driver in front of me slams on their brakes, yes, I don't want to be thinking about and analyzing, do I do this? You just slam on your brakes. So right. if you've read Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow.
Yeah, I love that book.
Right?
Confident
It's a big book to get through.
Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow. Check it out.
Yeah, it's a great book, hard to get through. But, so our subconscious is there with heuristics and biases because we just can't think through every decision. It would drive us crazy. But when it comes to complex decisions, like understanding your mortgage, getting your financial plan executed or sitting down to do it, not panicking when the markets happen, we're going to be, have these heuristics and biases and things running through our subconscious we don't even realize. Like, I knew it. Markets always lose people money. Right. Like they just do. Right. RSPs don't make money. They're a horrible investment. And then we just like, that's it. I'm selling it. I'm out. And it's like, okay, this is the time for the other system that you don't use when the car in front of you slams on their brakes and you slam on your brakes. This is when you're going to be uncomfortable and you've got to widen your gaze and you won't have all the information. And it may go against some of your core beliefs because that's what you were raised on. That, I just was sent a fascinating article of a study that was published at the National Post was writing about it, and I've talked about this as well, but more and more research is coming out that like generational poverty, that's in our DNA, like it's in our DNA. We actually, just like birds pass through their wisdom to other generations. We're passing that through. Your grandfather and grandmother were great negotiators. Great. Maybe you have some of that money savvy. Your parents or grandparents were incredibly poor. It's going to be harder for you, not just because it's passed through your DNA, but you heard all those conversations. You lived that. That was what. So as an adult, to unpack that, what do? You seek professional help, like someone like you, because I have a personal trainer. I have a nutritionist. I have a doctor. I have all these people that help me in my journey to continued wellness and health. But yet people don't do that when it comes to their finances, or then they don't trust the people that they chose. Right. Look, the market's tanking. You're reassuring them, look, let's look at this over the last 10 years. You see how this is just a little blip. You're wrong. It's like, so you get the right professionals and then you listen to those professionals and you just try really hard to work at identifying and bringing into your awareness these money, emotions that are driving you. But look, it's not easy. We do a lot of things on emotions that we don't even realize. And also it means that then we have to look inside, and that can also be very painful as well. So, but the journey is worth it. It's worth it to be financially well. And it behooves you to do this for your family. You're not just doing this for yourself anymore. You're doing this for future generations, because if you don't get your money act together, you're passing that on. Your extended family is hearing that. Your friends and family are hearing it. And in fact, we know the research of how your good and bad actions affect those in your life, even if they're not in the same city. You start smoking, quit smoking, start drinking, quit drinking, start a running group. That affects your peer group. So by you taking control and being uncomfortable and looking at these hard things, that affects your entire peer group as well. So I think it's a great cause to champion.
No, I love your passion, and I love the fact that you're talking about how the actions that you take when you get uncomfortable end up being something that you're transferring on, because kids, your children, the people around you don't always just go by what you say. They go by what they see you do. And it's like, how do you want to break that cycle? How do you want to transfer or pass on those really important money memories and habits? That's going to mean you're going to preserve wealth for generations to the family, right? Because as you said, you can have that other cycle where you just lose wealth, and that's something that your family does, and it's a cyclical thing as well. So such important information. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, how do you think how do you strike a balance? Because I think, again, these are the conversations I'm having with clients all the time around risk and reward. Yeah. How do you strike a balance, especially when it comes to just making those informed decisions around wealth building?
Yeah. So risk versus return. Like, are you talking
risk versus return, risk versus reward, but even just making that informed decision about, is this a solid financial risk that I'm taking? Am I letting emotions lead the way? Like, I need to do a gut check of some kind to go, am I in the front of the casino and I just lost money and I'm about to make another bet because it feels like, how do I strike that balance to realize, okay, maybe I'm about to fall off a cliff. There's a red flag about to hit me.
Right. Well, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, first of all, our brains are actually hardwired to have a present bias, as you know, right? Yes. We're biased for the present. If we hooked you up to an fMRI machine, you would think of yourself and your brain would light up. Now, if I asked you to think of yourself in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, that part of your brain would dim down and turn to thinking of a stranger. So if you want someone to not do something that's pleasurable today, spend on something they enjoy, gamble, whatever it is, putting yourself, the research shows, just 5 minutes a day for a couple of weeks, building a relationship with that future self. What, what is Jackie? What is your age in 10 years? No, writing your age down. Like, I am this age now. What am I doing? Who am I seeing? What activities am I participating in? How much money do I need to do all of that? As you build that relationship to your future self, you now have an energetic and like an actual neurochemical connection to that person. It alters how you make decisions now. Now, I'm not saying it's foolproof and you're not going to lead with emotions or make mistakes, but in a lot of regards, that can help you curtail spending or maybe other bad habits. But you were asking about risk versus return. Like, when I was in the industry and I would sit down with clients, I would run a lot of simulations with them before we would ever invest, because, they might come in my office and say, yeah, I think, 10% return long-term, that would be good for me. Oh, really? Okay. GICs are paying whatever back then, more than probably around now, because this was 20 years ago. And we did have a bit of inflation then, but and it'd be like, okay, so you just invested $1 million and you get your statement in 4 months and you're sitting at 900,000. That's right. Let's play that out. And it'd be like, what?
Yeah, exactly.
I can lose money. Yes, that's exactly what we've been talking about for half an hour, but they didn't really hear it.
That's right.
I think too, the financial industry, I know you do an amazing job. I know there's a lot of great planners and advisors out there, but I also know there's not enough out there that are really sitting with their clients. And it kind of like Murphy's Law. As soon as you get into the market, oftentimes that's when comes up, right? Yeah. And it's like really sitting with them and being like, okay, now we tested the waters a little bit. Obviously, we're going to pull back. That was too much for you. You said it, right? Mm-hmm. You said you could handle that. You couldn't. Here's the implication. And just spending more time on that, because when you get that right, then you can go a little bit more on autopilot. But if people are jumping in and out of the market, oh my goodness, they do such a disservice to their long-term financial well-being, if not, ruin their chances of any retirement. So yeah, there isn't, I don't think, a perfect balance, but, doing some of these exercises that we know, these simulations, connecting with your future self, they absolutely can help.
I love the whole future self thing, because it, to me, harkens back to having that financial plan, that documented plan where you understand what you're sort of executing on the goals you've set for yourself, and you're making that commitment to your future self. So I love all of that. Confidant community, are you listening to this amazing financial celebrity talk about the commitment you're making to your future self? What does that look like? Because does it mean that you're jumping in and out of the markets? What we know in the financial industry are the people who jump in and out of the markets never see the returns that are on these fund facts, right? These investment facts, the fund history, because they don't stay in the market long enough to realize that. So I'd love for you to answer this question in the chat, but when you set up your investments, were you doing worst case scenarios with your investment advisor to see how your investments can grow, but also how they can go down in the short run? And if not, it's still not too late to go back and sort of talk through since we're, some of you might feel you're in the worst case scenario now, maybe this is a good time to say, okay, let's revisit the investments I'm in. I may have an idea of what the worst case scenario is now, but what can happen over the course of the next 5-10 years in the markets? Why should I stay invested? Show me some history on the investments I'm in so I can have more confidence in the long run on why I should stay invested. Highly, highly recommend you go through that process. Now, final question. Honestly, thank you for dropping so many gems today, Kelley. But my last question is for those people, because I started to talk about them, who've already experienced loss in the markets, whatever that, not just loss in the markets, but some loss. Maybe they lost their job and they're worried about how they're going to pay their bills, or they had some other financial issue that they're dealing with. So if you're going through experiencing some kind of financial loss, do you have any advice or strategies for how someone like that can start to rebuild confidence around their financial management again?
Yeah, I think it's like a loss in anything. Understanding that it's not your fault, even if you had, taking responsibility if you can. If you were a victim of fraud, it might have not been your fault, or divorce, or things that are death, or job loss. And realizing that, again, like with your health, things are fluid. There is no one who gets to just put a check mark on their health and put a check mark on their wealth and say, thank goodness that's done. But you're not going to hear about it when it comes to people's wealth, right? Like you're going to hear when they did well in Bitcoin. You're not going to hear when they lost all of this on something else. You're just not going to hear it. So you can't trust what everyone else is saying. Realize you're not alone, and realize there's always hope. Like there is always, and I don't care. Do not let, boating Lake Ontario last weekend with a friend and watching the wake behind the boat. Like that is the trail. That does not drive the boat. I don't care if you have a 40-year history or 50 or 60 years of doing things wrong financially. That should not drive your boat. You drive your boat. You need the right help and the right experts that you might not have yet, but they're out there. There is always, I don't care how dire your financial situation is, there is always an out. There's always a way forward. But quite frankly, you probably will need help. We all do in all areas of our life. So reach out to people like you, Jackie, on this call. I know you give people a free consultation.
That's right.
Why not take that? Why not take that? Someone is giving you 30 minutes free that can see your blind spots. Oh my gosh, even if you're not the right person for them, or they need debt counseling or what have you, take all the free help that you can. But there is always a way forward. And then very lastly, don't focus on the loss, right? We all have things that we can learn from. They can propel us forward. But that is where I see the biggest mistake is when people just can't let go. I lost that much in that divorce. I, lost that much in that business, and they just won't move forward. I think that is the biggest impediment to a brighter future.
I love that. And it kind of goes back to where we started with Annie Lennox. It kind of keeps you in that spiral of depression where you can't move forward. And I just love the fact, you've done my job for me talking about, reaching out. How do you get your confidence back? Realize it's not your fault. Realize you're not alone. Don't dwell on it. And then it's all about taking action, setting an intention to build wealth for the future, breaking that generational curse. If that's something that's been plaguing you, breaking that, changing your mindset, but taking action is the key. Nobody loses weight if they don't do the work, right? See where you're at, check the scale, check your numbers. I've got Jody from our team on this call reach out to us. So Jody, feel free to put in the chat, reach out to our team if you're looking for that 30-minute strategy call. Even if you don't work with us, take that information, arm yourself, empower yourself around your finances. So thank you so much for saying that. And I love what you're doing in the workplace setting, Kelley. So if somebody is looking to build their financial literacy around in the workplace, if an employer is listening, what do they need to do? How do they get in touch with you?
Just head over to kelleykehn.com. Yeah, we'd love to have a conversation with you. We think that financial wellness in the workplace is so important, especially with
Indeed.
the Bank of Canada announcing another
interest rate
means
hike.
that people are going to be more and more stressed. And we think that employers that really get that financial literacy and wellness makes for a better workforce, happier employees that stick around. We'd love to hear from you and have a chat.
No, 100%. Rather than, people at work worrying about their finances, not thinking about their job, that they're empowered again with that, armed with that information to make informed financial decisions. Kelley Keehn, this was so amazing. Thank you so much for joining me today. Honestly, so Confidant community, did you find this helpful? Please, if you did find this helpful, share the information. Sharing is caring. If you didn't get a chance to see the full live, we're going to have a live summary that we're going to put out on Sunday. So we'll pass that on to you as well, Kelley. And it just summarizes all of the key points around how to really overcome losing wealth and strategies. So definitely check that out. Like and share what we have. Follow us for all of the latest financial details, for all the financial news, and we've got another live for you next week. So see you next week, Confidant community. Thanks again for checking out the live today. Talk soon. See you soon. A really special guest today that's going to be helping me talk about losing wealth, because that's the reason I chose Annie Lennox. And there's a really awesome backstory to Here Comes the Rain Again that I wanted to share with the Confidant community folks, because I always want to keep you in the loop. When Annie Lennox wrote this song, her and her former partner from the Eurythmics,